They report that a primordial energy lies dormant in a latent state, with the potential to challenge known laws and reconfigure the destiny of entire nations. Many call it Vril, something so intense that it could raise mountains or reverse the course of entire governments. There are dark rumors that in isolated basements, rituals took place where members of a secret society would channel this invisible fire for sinister purposes. The hypothesis is not restricted to a distant legend. Reports circulate of encoded documents that would indicate advanced practices of mind control, telepathy, and matter manipulation, all wrapped in a conspiratorial atmosphere that intrigues some and causes disbelief in others. However, a troubling question remains. If this power indeed exists, why do the evidences remain buried in obscure archives or denied by authorities? Who would profit, after all, from the possibility of dominating wills and hearts? While humanity divides itself between scientific visions and mystical beliefs, the eventual tangibility of Vril awakens both hope and fear. If this force is within reach of a few hands, the risk of turning it into an absolute weapon haunts any mind that reflects on the consequences. Or perhaps, for some, this is exactly the key that would free humanity from its own shackles.
At the end of World War II, as the Allied troops closed in on the ruins of the Third Reich, their covert missions went far beyond seizing conventional weapons. Some specialized teams were instructed to find records of a purported primordial energy believed capable of redefining the boundaries of physical reality. This power, referred to as Vril, was said to be the trump card Hitler sought to secure total supremacy. Behind the Nazi machine, persistent rumors spoke of an enigmatic group known as the Vril Society. Unlike typical military engineers and strategists, this circle was made up of mystics, mediums, and researchers of esoteric theories. Their common goal was to explore an invisible force that only initiates could master. It wasn't merely propaganda or mystical theater meant to impress the masses. There was a deliberate quest for a power that didn't belong to the ordinary world. It's worth remembering that the idea of an invisible force had been circulating in Europe well before Nazism, appearing in intellectual circles and specialized publications that attempted to explain phenomena beyond the scope of mainstream science. Some believed this principle was everywhere. It could heal the incurable, open gateways to other dimensions, and perhaps create an insurmountable military advantage. This wasn't about traditional religious faith, but rather about something that could offer a unifying explanation for multiple enigmas. German society, especially in the period following World War I, was hungry for a sense of national renewal after the humiliation imposed by the Treaty of Versailles. In this fertile ground, several secret societies sprang up. Some of these brotherhoods attracted figures who would later be among the upper ranks of the Nazi regime, and this is where speculations about a hidden power found resonance. Nicholas Goodrick Clarke, a historian who studied Nazi occultism, noted that profound national crises opened the door for mystical interpretations of historical events. A collapsing Germany longed for explanations for its collective suffering, and certain ideological currents pointed to the possibility of tapping into cosmic forces that could free the country from its limitations. Some might argue that a military, seemingly technocratic regime would leave no room for occultism. Yet National Socialism blended technological rationalism with ancient myths in surprising ways. Modern science was harnessed when useful, but the regime nourished a fascination with mystical elements that fueled the ideal of a Germany destined to dominate not just on the material plane, but possibly on some metaphysical level. In secluded mansions on the outskirts of Berlin and Munich, this group's secret meetings allegedly took place amid elaborate rituals. Old reports mention mediumship and trance states, including the presence of women with long hair, serving as antennas for cosmic energies. Maria Orsic is the main figure mentioned. She appears in obscure archives as central to receiving telepathic messages from non-human entities on how to activate the Vril. Some say that certain papers survived the destruction and point to diagrams of anti-gravity engines, directed energy weapons, and instantaneous communication systems powered by this invisible force. Skeptics question the authenticity of such documents, but the intrigue lies precisely in the gap of official data. The lack of conclusive evidence does not, by itself, disprove the possibility that much was suppressed or kept out of public view. Historian Joseph Farrell, who examined the Third Reich's secret technologies, underscores that the Vril was not solely tied to esoteric fantasies, but also to advanced military prototypes Germany was developing. Many details regarding these projects still haven't been fully released by the victorious powers of World War II. When thinking about the dark shadows of the Third Reich, attention typically focuses on barbarism and racial intolerance. Little is said about the metaphysical experiments that might have occurred behind the scenes. If the Vril Society actually existed, it would have been a crucial element of this power structure, a hidden key to ambitions of domination that went beyond traditional knowledge. Joseph Farrell believes that this lesser-known side of Nazism could offer valuable clues about ultra-secret programs that still puzzle researchers to this day. The mere possibility that the Third Reich might have harbored a mystical layer, one that used state resources to investigate unknown phenomena, triggers both curiosity and apprehension. It's important to remember that none of this appears in standard textbooks. Whatever does come to light surfaces through scattered reports, controversial documents, and independent research, often labeled conspiracy theory. To many, it's all just a fantasy fed by the fascination with the Nazi mystery. To others, it's in that borderline realm between advanced science and occult experiments that the explanation may lie for certain strange events that official history rarely addresses. The Vril's path into the German imagination began with a seemingly harmless novel. In 1871, Edward Bulwer-Lytton, a British aristocrat and writer, published The Coming Race, introducing readers to an underground civilization called the Vril, which had absolute control over an energetic fluid with the power to heal or destroy on a grand scale. The term Vril appeared as speculative literature, the product of an age marked both by exhilarating scientific discoveries and the yearning to explore fantastic worlds. Bulwer-Lytton's text described Vril as superior to electricity, capable of annihilating entire armies or curing illnesses. At first, it was no more than a Victorian-era fantasy that amused readers or sparked their curiosity. However, in the esoteric circles of Europe, the fiction was interpreted as a veiled revelation. Helena Blavatsky, a key figure in the Theosophical Society, suggested that Bulwer-Lytton might have come into contact with ancient secrets, making Vril a coded clue to a genuine force. In her work, The Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky even mentioned that such energy was already familiar to Indian sages and other cultures. Getting the stamp of approval from a respected figure in the mystical world turned Vril into an intense topic of debate within European occultism. In Germany, a country where theosophy already had fertile ground, interest in it soared. Willy Ley, a German engineer who fled to the United States before the war broke out, reported after the war that there had indeed been groups in Berlin who genuinely believed in the real existence of Vril. Nicholas Goodrick Clark noted that post-World War I, Germany desperately needed deeper meanings. In a devastated nation, ideas explaining defeat and offering hope for a renewed future found an especially receptive audience. Vril fit neatly into this environment, embraced by some as a primordial source of power that could restore German greatness. The Weimar Republic was a paradoxical era. On one hand, revolutionary scientific minds like Werner Heisenberg and other quantum physicists emerged. On the other, esoteric organizations thrived, mixing ancient symbols, astrology, racial theories, and Eastern mysticism. In that cultural melting pot, it was hardly surprising that scholars and curious minds sought to build bridges between cutting-edge science and fantastic speculations. Fiction thus became an obsession. The Thule Society, a predecessor of the Nazi Party, adopted mythical notions about Nordic civilizations with extraterrestrial heritage. By extension or affinity, the idea of a Vril society arose, its members convinced that Edward Bulwer-Lytton had revealed a secret history disguised as a novel. The anthropologist Michael Barkan calls this phenomenon stigmatized knowledge, illustrating how seemingly literary texts can become hidden truth for groups craving mystical explanations. When Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933, an ideological crucible was already in place, one that fused biological racism, military engineering, and beliefs in cosmic energies. The once romantic fiction, reimagined as esoteric fact, turned into a tool that legitimized practices with potentially devastating consequences. The official history of the Third Reich contains no explicit references to a Vril society. This absence, far from dismissing the possibility of its existence, fuels an aura of secrecy. Some maintain that a genuinely secret organization would never appear in official documents, precisely to avoid leaving any trace. Scattered reports and vague testimonies suggest that such a group emerged around 1919, mostly composed of female mediums. Their goal purportedly transcended politics. They aimed to contact non-human intelligences and harness an invisible force permeating the universe. It was a bold quest, yet compelling for those who saw Europe in ruins and yearned for a miraculous path to triumph. Some experts emphasize that clandestine German societies in the early 20th century all shared a belief in an ancient, hidden knowledge which, if rediscovered, would confer practically unlimited power. In the case of this particular group, Maria Orsic stands out as the central medium, responsible for channeling instructions from entities allegedly connected to the Taurus constellation, specifically Aldebaran. The most captivating aspect of this account revolves around the alleged technical information received in trance. If these documents were real, they contained designs for anti-gravity machinery, formulas to manipulate the very matrix of matter, and even methods for interdimensional communication. Naturally, there are those who insist it's all pure collective imagination, but others point to the possibility of genuinely complex technical schemes with an origin that defies explanation. At the group's purported meetings, rituals blended theosophical references, runic symbols, and Germanic pagan traditions. Secret gatherings around round tables, metallic devices described as Vril machines, and the medium's long hair, which they never cut, all contribute to a mythology of feminine power, channeling subtle energies. People often question the lack of solid evidence. Some argue that the Third Reich's covert operations were protected by elaborate counter-espionage measures, so if there was sensitive material, it was carefully destroyed or seized by the Allied powers. Researchers like Michael Fitzgerald propose that efficient conspiracies do sometimes remain hidden for decades, only emerging when archives are declassified or witnesses decide to speak. The relationship between the Vril Society and the Thule Society remains uncertain. Some suggest a direct link, while others believe the former was an even more exclusive circle. Either way, both groups shared the conviction that Germany held a special cosmic connection with a glorious ancestral past and destiny. A symbol allegedly associated with the group, comprising 3 concentric rings and a vertical line, is mentioned in accounts of the regime's extreme scientific projects, including possible disc-shaped prototypes known as Haunebu or Vril Odin. These anti-gravity craft still surface in dubious photos and purported technical diagrams, fueling speculation about Nazi flying saucers. Researcher Joseph Farrell mentions that their rituals aim to create a unified energy field through sound frequencies, visualization, and sacred geometry, all intended to heighten mastery of the invisible force. As fantastic as it sounds, persistent anecdotes claim these practices were not mere eccentricities, but actually received Nazi state funding, at least in the early stages, before Hitler solidified his dictatorship. Another mystery concerns the disappearance of Maria Orsic and her circle at the end of the war. An enigmatic note stating, "No one remains here," appears in publications on Nazi esoteric theories, suggesting a spectacular escape or something even less plausible, the successful use of Vril to achieve dimensional transit. For skeptics, it's just fiction inflated by wild imagination. For believers in esoteric theories, it's proof that not only did this power exist, it was indeed set in motion. Most mainstream historians tend to dismiss the role of esoteric beliefs within the Nazi regime. Even so, the obsessions of leaders like Heinrich Himmler reveal a disturbing picture. As head of the SS, Himmler founded the Ahnenerbe, an institution that, under the guise of scholarly research, sent expeditions worldwide in search of ancient mysteries and relics believed to hold supernatural power. Himmler genuinely believed the Aryan race descended from near-divine beings, and that Germans could reclaim this power through rituals and a rediscovery of ancestral secrets. Even in wartime, the budget for these investigations shows how significant the mystical component was for the highest ranks of Nazism. The famous Tibetan expedition, led by Ernst Schaefer in 1938, was not restricted to anthropology. It included skull measurements and the collection of spiritual artifacts. At Wurzburg Castle, purchased by Himmler, ceremonial spaces were created to symbolize a Nazi chivalric order, with direct references to the Black Sun. This symbol, a wheel with 12 runic rays, was considered by certain initiates as a representation of the primordial source of power, something quite close to the notion of Vril within the Third Reich's imagination. Rudolf Hess, Hitler's right-hand man until his mysterious flight to Scotland, was deeply immersed in astrology, occultism, and dowsing. Reports suggest Hess's decisions were influenced by esoteric predictions. Hitler, at least during certain phases, kept astrological advisors and claimed to enter an altered state of consciousness during his speeches. People close to him recounted that he felt possessed by a force beyond the ordinary. Any direct link between these leaders and the alleged Vril Society has never been conclusively established, but scattered clues hint at Maria Orsic meeting with high-ranking Nazis. In Soviet archives, researchers found an SS memorandum referencing increased funding for propulsion research based on Principle V, which some interpret as a direct nod to Vril. Hans Kammler, the official overseeing secret weapons development, managed advanced projects in underground facilities and vanished without a trace in the last days of the war. Nick Cook, a defense technology specialist, noted testimonies from that time describing breakthroughs that appeared to defy orthodox physics, possibly pointing to experiments rooted in concepts akin to Vril. In the final months of the war, as defeat seemed inevitable, these esoteric studies reportedly intensified. Hitler pinned his hopes on miracle weapons to turn the tide, whether they were advanced rockets or even more arcane devices born from deep mysticism fused with cutting-edge engineering. So-called Foo Fighters, luminous spheres spotted by Allied pilots, were described by some as manifestations of experimental Nazi aircraft. Although conclusive proof is lacking, these objects continue to intrigue aviation historians. Renato Vesco, an aviation expert, posited that prototypes using unknown propulsion systems might have been tested. Most records for such programs were classified by the Allies, and much of what we know comes from fragmented testimonies. Wernher von Braun, a key figure in developing V-2 rockets, avoided discussing projects outside the conventional scope. Interestingly, after he was integrated into the American space program, he never outright denied the possibility of unconventional research. Thus, at the heart of Nazism, we find not only military and political ambition, but also a genuine belief in hidden forces. The notion that the Third Reich attempted to turn these mystical potentials into actual power is not pure fantasy. It mirrors an effort to use anything at their disposal to guarantee victory, even the stuff official science dismissed as make-believe. Nicholas Goodrick Clark observed that this totalitarian regime blended modern and archaic elements. It showcased advanced technology, but also harbored ancient mystical convictions. That bizarre fusion of cutting-edge technology and archaic esotericism may very well have produced projects that ventured into areas beyond common imagination. The idea of an invisible, omnipresent, universal energy is not limited to the Vril legend. It spans eras and civilizations around the globe. In Hinduism, there's prana, the vital breath manipulated through practices like pranayama. In Chinese tradition, qi, or qi, has served as the foundation of martial arts, medicine, and philosophy for millennia. Physicists and philosophers such as Fritjof Capra have noted that these concepts, often dismissed as superstition in the West, display a remarkable, almost scientific structure within their respective cultural contexts. Traditional Chinese medicine, for instance, deals with qi in terms of specific channels and points, showing tangible results, even though Western science remains hesitant to accept them without laboratory-style empirical proof. Vril, therefore, might just be another chapter in humanity's long quest to find something that surpasses conventional matter. The difference is in how the Third Reich might have exploited this force. Whereas Eastern traditions teach harmony and healing, the Nazis allegedly sought an imperialistic approach. Wilhelm Reich's story draws an interesting parallel. He studied orgone, yet another form of cosmic energy he believed could be harnessed. His research, deemed bold, was suppressed by American authorities, who seized and burned his materials. This episode suggests that certain avenues of inquiry into anomalous phenomena and esoteric theories still land in murky territory even today. The argument goes that conventional science fails to detect such phenomena because its methodologies are incapable of capturing them. Researchers like David Bohm, an Einstein collaborator, posited deeper orders of reality beyond the reach of our current instruments. He spoke of underlying implicate orders that may reveal connections beyond what our eyes and labs can currently observe. Some draw parallels to the concept of dark energy, which makes up nearly 70% of the universe according to cosmologists, yet remains largely unexplained, highlighting just how much we still don't understand. Michio Kaku, a leading theoretical physicist, has pointed out that many ideas once considered absurd eventually turn out to be correct. The real controversy in the Vril legend is not its conceptual basis. After all, multiple cultures reference analogous principles, but the idea that a secret society manipulated it for dark purposes. While ancient traditions impose strict ethical rules around such forces, the Nazis may have harnessed this knowledge destructively to serve imperial ambitions. Transpersonal philosophy experts like Ken Wilber note that extraordinary powers or knowledge without equivalent moral development lead to catastrophe. A relevant comparison: Hindu tantric texts caution against pursuing siddhis, supernatural abilities, without ethical discipline, warning that those who sidestep inner growth can succumb to their own megalomania. In short, there is a striking cross-cultural consensus on subtle energies, pointing to humanity's enduring fascination with invisible dimensions. The key difference lies in how each society employs this potential. In the Third Reich's case, the militarized use of something that might have been a source of healing or spiritual growth represents a profound paradox, a distortion of knowledge. Just as Nazi genetics became synonymous with the corruption of legitimate scientific research, interest in unknown forces isn't inherently misguided. Yet twisting them into instruments of tyrannical power reveals how sinister motives can contaminate any field of study. As the Third Reich fell, both Americans and Soviets rushed to capture not only rocket scientists, but also any documents and prototypes related to unconventional research. They were already anticipating the Cold War to come, where technology, even that arising from fringe ideas, would be crucial for global supremacy. Operation Paperclip, carried out by the United States, brought over 1,000 German scientists to American soil, including Wernher von Braun. There are records of a subunit focused on finding clues to anomalous phenomena and non-conventional propulsion, supposedly zeroing in on underground labs in Thuringia, an area riddled with rumors of Vril-related experiments. Declassified documents decades later include references to unusually configured disks seized from secret German facilities. Defense technology expert Nick Cook describes this material as compelling evidence that the US investigated something beyond just the V-2 rockets and conventional jet engines. On the Soviet side, the same thing was happening. Stalin's operatives sought to confiscate equipment and technical files that might expedite military or space programs. Sergei Korolev, who would later lead the Soviet space program, reportedly examined fragments of German research on field polarization, resembling a physics far more advanced than what was common at the time. The inevitable question: if something so extraordinary was seized, why didn't it spark a public wave of innovations in the following years? The conspiracy-minded explanation is that these finds were absorbed into ultra-secret black projects that continued to develop away from any public scrutiny. Richard Dolan, a former intelligence officer, argues that many black programs operate in highly compartmentalized cells, making it plausible for certain technologies to remain in development for decades without public awareness. Another line of speculation claims that the most critical members of the Vril society were never captured. The mysterious note saying "no one remains here," supposedly left behind by Maria Orsic, hints at an extraordinary escape that goes far beyond the standard Nazi flight routes to South America. Some even propose she made a dimensional jump. Operation High Jump, led by American Admiral Richard E. Byrd in Antarctica, fuels popular theories involving encounters with flying machines capable of zipping around the globe at amazing speeds. While the official explanation is that it was a polar military exercise, the vast scale of the expedition and certain passages from Byrd's diary have led enthusiasts to speculate that a hidden Nazi base may have been established in the war's final days. Remote parts of South America also show up in accounts of fortified Aryan enclaves where advanced technology was supposedly being developed. Luis Fernando Mostajo, a Bolivian mystic, claimed in a 1970s interview that he encountered fair-haired Germans in an isolated region operating mysterious devices that manipulated energy fields. It's true that many of these testimonies lack direct proof and might be little more than folklore. Still, the recurrence of similar stories in different places piques curiosity. Researchers like Nick Redfern highlight that Western governments and the Soviets invested in mind control and psychic studies in the early post-war years, for example, MK Ultra, suggesting a continued interest in lines of inquiry that might have started with the Nazis. Even after the Soviet Union collapsed, there remain sensitive archives that stay sealed. The official excuse is national security, fanning suspicions that something really significant might be kept under wraps. Jeffrey Richardson, a historian of espionage, noted that projects are frequently shut down only to be rebooted later under new code names. There's no guarantee that Nazi-era esoteric theories didn't resurface during the Cold War. Whatever the case, a significant number of researchers believe that the quest for the invisible force known as Vril didn't die in 1945. Working in secret, it may have shaped subsequent technological races and hidden rivalries between superpowers. This raises the haunting question of what might really have been uncovered in German labs. Was it the embryo of a science ahead of its time, or simply delusional fantasies from a regime on the brink of collapse? Myths don't endure by accident. They survive because they speak to something profoundly human: fear, hope, or the suspicion that there's more to reality than what we learn in schools and textbooks. The alleged Vril society, whether a historical fact or symbolic construct, intrigues thousands precisely because it raises a fundamental question: how many strange forces might be controlled behind the scenes, out of public reach? Richard Heinberg, a mythological researcher, argues that major narratives, even if questionable, often reflect legitimate collective concerns. In the case of Vril, the key question is how much humanity still doesn't know about its own potential or about the subtler laws of the cosmos. Add to this the suspicion that powerful governments and institutions may be holding on to secrets that could shape the fate of the world. After the war, authors like Louis Pauwels and Jacques Bergier, through their classic The Morning of the Magicians, helped popularize the connection between Nazism and the occult. In the 1990s, Washington, Harbinson released novels detailing how revolutionary Nazi aircraft might have continued operating from hidden bases. This mixture of historical facts, speculation, and imagination generates passionate debate. We're in an era when conspiracy theories flourish, especially as people lose faith in institutions. The possibility that the Third Reich conducted invisible forces research with supporting documents and experiments seized by the victors fits right into a worldview where government elites conceal information to maintain control. Sociologists like Margot Kennedy see in the rejection of official history a genuine distrust, not mere paranoia. It's the awareness that the winning side's narrative often disguises unsavory motives. In the Nazis' case, absorbing their scientists and research into American and Soviet programs proves that much of what the Reich developed was covertly adopted. Jean Baudrillard, famous for his reflections on hyperreality, noted that modern humans hunger for something deeper than the usual official versions. It's possible that the legend of Vril persists because it speaks to this yearning for mysteries that transcend day-to-day banality. Even if many stories about Vril are exaggerated, it remains intriguing to think about certain anomalous phenomena that may indeed have been studied in German labs. Modern science is tremendously complex, especially in quantum physics, consciousness research, and fields that graze the edges of the inexplicable. So it's natural to speculate that we're still far from a complete understanding of reality. Thomas Kuhn taught us that new scientific paradigms face fierce resistance until the evidence becomes undeniable. Could it be that some kind of invisible force awaits confirmation in the future, perhaps under a different name, free of the Nazi-era stigma? To those researching the critical history of the Third Reich, it's not so naive to keep these theories on the table. Nazi occultist roots are well documented, and prove how archaic mythic elements were intertwined with modern technology. And who can say for sure that this synergy didn't yield astonishing discoveries, kept top secret for strategic use in the Cold War and beyond? Diana Pasulka, who studies unconventional phenomena, warns that the real danger isn't the investigation of unusual ideas, but the fact that they took place under a totalitarian system devoid of transparency. If the Third Reich did make breakthroughs based on esoteric theories, those discoveries would inevitably have been guided by an authoritarian mindset rooted in exclusion, something that could have led to dire consequences. How then can we separate fact from fiction? Michael Shermer, from the Skeptic Society, advises an open mind while demanding coherent standards of evidence. Lack of proof isn't proof of non-existence, especially in contexts of extreme secrecy. But simply embracing every story because it's mysterious doesn't help clarify historical truth either. Ken Wilber, a philosopher who integrates science and spirituality, recommends a pluralistic methodological approach, addressing each realm, physical, psychic, historical, with the appropriate tools. Anomalous phenomena might require investigations beyond mainstream scientific methods, but must still be tackled responsibly. For those who wonder whether these alleged discoveries might survive today, remember that the arms race and secret projects didn't end in 1945. Modern governments still run secluded labs, and the public only sees a fraction of their work. What other secrets, conspiratorial or otherwise, could have been inherited from Nazi experiments? Michel Foucault reminded us of the close bond between power and knowledge, pointing out that those who control knowledge production guide the course of history. If, hypothetically, the Vril society was real, or if a practical counterpart of the Vril concept arose within the Reich, some of that knowledge, real or manipulated, might have formed the foundation of projects that continue to this day. In the end, we're left with a dilemma that stirs as much fascination as dread. What if invisible forces truly shape world events, held by the few who understand their subtleties? The Vril story reminds us how thin the line is between the quest for enlightenment and the lust for power. The history of Nazism shows that when individuals consumed by domination acquire access to either advanced science or esoteric theories, the outcome can be tragic for humanity. Perhaps the biggest lesson is that if such subtle energies do exist, they should never be monopolized by tyrannical regimes, but studied transparently under ethical supervision. As long as secrecy prevails, the risk remains that Vril, or any comparable force, will become yet another tool of oppression. Ultimately, the invisible legacy of this narrative lies in our reflection on what our world keeps hidden. There's a growing call for disclosing secrets, unsealing archives, and letting free people evaluate just how deep our ignorance of the cosmos goes. Maybe the real breakthrough isn't about finding flying discs or forging miraculous weapons, but about acknowledging how much more there is to learn, both outwardly, through the mysteries of physics and consciousness, and inwardly, by developing the moral maturity to avoid repeating the tragedies that unfold when knowledge is twisted for destructive ends. Uncomfortable questions remain. What secret research continues full steam ahead nowadays, hidden under billion-dollar budgets? What incendiary discoveries might be stored in impenetrable underground facilities guarded by the tightest security protocols? And in an era of increased skepticism, what is our collective responsibility when it comes to these well-protected backstage dealings? To many, the story of the so-called Vril Society is a reminder that not everything we call a conspiracy theory is pure invention. Sometimes the curtain obscuring reality is far thicker than we'd like to believe. Every transformation starts with recognizing your role as a co-creator, and the only way to connect with this divine intelligence is through meditation. We've developed a series of audio tools to help you reach this higher state of consciousness. To learn more and get immediate access, click the link on the screen or in the comments. If this video resonated with you, let us know in the comments. It made sense to me.